It was my first night stationed at the base, cold, dry, and eerily silent. I'd been briefed on protocols, given access to security systems, and assigned a route for my solo patrol. Everything about the place felt strangely sterile, like a hospital stripped of all life, and yet something about it felt watched. I walked into the security office to get a feel for the cameras, expecting the usual layout: perimeter fences, watchtowers, maybe thermal detection zones. But what I saw made me pause. Almost every camera was pointed inward, not toward the outside. Threats, not at the fence or forest beyond, but inward to the courtyards, dorm halls, and especially to one long corridor labeled Zone C. Curious. I asked the night commander about it. He was an older man with a scarred cheek and tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much and said too little. He didn't respond right away. He just stared at the monitor I was pointing at, then looked over at me, leaned in, and said in a quiet, brittle voice, "It's not for them, it's for us." I laughed awkwardly, assuming it was some dark military joke, but his face didn't flinch. No smile, no punchline, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant buzz of static on one of the feeds. The unease started then small, sharp needles of discomfort under my skin. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe the guy was just messing with the rookie. I resumed my patrol, boots crunching over gravel, flashlights sweeping the dim corners of the facility. The corridors were lined with steel doors and coated panels. It looked like a mix between a prison and a science lab. Occasionally, I passed a motion sensor that clicked on an overhead light with a mechanical hum. Most of the doors were numbered, but a few had nothing but red slashes across them, painted, not digital. Those I avoided. Around 2:40 a.m., I passed near Zone C again. My radio crackled. I paused, raising it to my ear. Static, then, faintly, a knock. Not on the radio, somewhere nearby. I turned, expecting to see someone coming around the corner. Nothing, just a long hallway and a flickering light at the end. My stomach tightened. I walked cautiously toward the sound, every step echoing unnaturally loud. Another knock, louder this time. I reached the end of the hall and stopped in front of one of the red-slashed doors. This one had no handle, just a small black keypad, blinking faintly. I stared at it, unsure if it was broken or just waiting. Then came the third knock, except this time it wasn't faint. It was powerful, deliberate. From inside, my body locked up. I wanted to say it was just a vent or a pipe shift, anything normal. But deep down, I knew better. The corridor behind me suddenly went dim. All but one of the lights went out. That single overhead bulb flickered like a dying firefly, casting jerky shadows across the wall. Then, from the door, a voice, not clear, not loud, but unmistakable. It said my name, my full name. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but I stayed rooted. I don't know why. Maybe it was disbelief. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe something worse. I whispered, "Who's there?" But I already knew I didn't want an answer. The keypad let out a beep. A single green light flashed, and the sound of a bolt unlocking echoed. Down the hall, I didn't wait. I turned and sprinted, radio bouncing on my shoulder, breath slicing the silence like a blade. I made it back to the security office and slammed the door shut behind me. My chest heaved. I glanced at the screens, dreading what I might see. All the inward-facing cameras in Zone C had gone static. Every single one. The commander walked in moments later, calm as ever. "You went near door 17, didn't you?" he asked. I nodded. I couldn't lie. His face sagged. Rookies always do. He didn't reprimand me. He didn't explain. He simply sat down, flicked a switch, and typed in a long override code. Slowly, the cameras came back online, except for one, the hallway. Outside door 17. That one remained dead. Later, I asked an older guard if he knew what was behind the door. He hesitated, then said, "It's not what's behind the door you should worry about. It's what we built the door to contain." That was 3 weeks ago. Every night since, at exactly 2:42 a.m., I hear the knocks again. 3 of them, always. The same. Sometimes I think I hear whispers after them, muffled, distant, but clawing to be heard. I haven't told anyone else, not even the commander. But last night, the knocks came earlier. 2:31 a.m., and I wasn't even near Zone C. I was in my quarters, and this time, it knocked on my door. The facility had a rule I didn't understand. At first, never look at the south-facing mirror in Barrack 6 after midnight. It was casually mentioned during orientation, slipped between emergency protocols and radio frequencies, as if it were an afterthought. Oh, and don't look at the south mirror in Barrack 6 after midnight. Just trust me. That's what my supervisor said, chuckling nervously and moving on to the next point. At the time, I thought maybe it was just a prank, like a hazing ritual for new guards. I didn't even think there was a mirror in Barrack 6. But the more I settled into the base, the more I started to notice how seriously others took the rule. Nobody slept in Barrack 6 unless they had to. It wasn't officially off limits, but every soldier, technician, and even janitor avoided it like it was cursed. The lights in that section of the compound were always dimmer, the air heavier, and whenever I walked by, the hallway would seem just a little colder. Eventually, I couldn't help myself. I wanted to see the mirror. Not because I didn't believe them, but because part of me did. That deep, instinctual part of your brain that wants to know why it's afraid. So one night, when my patrol schedule took me near that part of the barracks, I waited until the cameras rotated, checked the motion detectors, and quietly stepped inside. Barrack 6 was nearly empty. Dust collected on unused beds and storage lockers, and a thick, metallic scent lingered in the air. I moved slowly, flashlight in hand, heart already pounding, and then I saw it. On the far wall, across from a rusted bunk bed, stood the mirror. It was tall and narrow, with an antique brass frame that looked completely out of place in a military facility. The glass was murky, almost like fog had permanently seeped into it, and it reflected barely anything. It was nearly midnight. I could feel it. I looked at my watch. 11:57. I could have walked away. Should have, but my feet didn't listen. I stood in front of the mirror and stared. My own reflection stared back, but there was something off about it. The lighting was slightly different. My reflection's expression didn't quite match mine. I tilted my head slightly, so did it, but not in sync. There was a delay, just a second, maybe less, but enough to notice. I blinked. The reflection didn't. I stepped back. The reflection leaned forward. I froze. The air in the room shifted heavier, denser, like a thunderstorm about to crack open. The second hand on my watch ticked to midnight. The mirror rippled like water, and my reflection smiled. I hadn't moved. I hadn't even twitched. But in that warped glass, I watched myself smile. A wide, crooked grin, teeth slightly too many, stretching just a little too far, and then it stepped out, not physically, not in some dramatic movie way, but it was like it wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was here. The room changed. I couldn't explain it if I tried, but it was like something fundamental in the air had shifted. The shadows were darker. My breathing was louder. Every sound echoed with too many layers. The mirror was still there, but now it was empty, just foggy glass, reflecting nothing. I stumbled out of the barrack, heart racing, flashlight beams shaking across the floor. Behind me, I heard footsteps, but they didn't match mine. They were heavier, slower, like whatever followed didn't need to rush. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Something told me if I looked again, I'd see it, and once I saw it, it wouldn't let me forget. When I got back to the security hub, I tried to check the hallway camera outside Barrack 6. Footage was missing. Not glitched, not scrambled, just missing. Like the system had decided to erase the time I was in there. I asked the technician about it the next day, casually. He glanced up, pale and serious, and said, "You didn't go in there, did you?" I said no. He didn't believe me. Since then, things have been different. My reflection in bathroom mirrors seems fine, but sometimes I feel like it blinks a moment too late, or it watches me a little too long after I've turned away. Once, I swore I saw it smirk as I shut off the light. I've started avoiding mirrors altogether. I shave in the dark. I change without looking, but it doesn't matter, because at night, when I close my eyes, I see it. Me, but not me. Watching, waiting, and every now and then, just before I fall asleep, I hear a voice that sounds just like mine whisper, "Let me in." We were told to always leave one meal untouched in the mess hall before midnight, even if no one was around to eat it. At first, I thought it was just some old Basque tradition or superstition, maybe a tribute to fallen soldiers or a leftover custom from decades ago. But the tone in our commanding officer's voice made it clear this wasn't symbolic. It was essential. He said, "Do not eat the extra tray. Do not throw it away. Leave it out every night. No questions." And so, every night around 11:45 p.m., someone would quietly place a full meal on the center table of the dining area. We weren't allowed to sit there. That table was always left empty except for that one tray dot. At first, nothing seemed strange. The tray would be gone by morning, which made me assume it was just some night shift worker helping themselves. But when I asked the night crew, they all denied touching it. Everyone swore they left it alone, and some even claimed to have checked at 3 or 4 a.m., only to find it still there until they looked back again, and it was gone. No sound, no movement, just vanished. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided one night to stay hidden in the mess hall after hours to see who or what was taking the meal. I sat quietly in the dark corner behind the vending machines, with the lights off and only the dim glow from the exit sign lighting the room. The untouched tray sat in the center, steam rising slowly off the mashed potatoes and chicken. Midnight approached. Nothing, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is pressing in on you. At 12:06 a.m., the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. I could see my breath, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hallways, low, deliberate, but not like boots. It was more like a dragging sound, something soft and wet being pulled across the floor. The footsteps never reached the door, but somehow the shadow did. I saw it move first tall, thin, not quite human. It stretched unnaturally across the floor and touched the legs of the table. I couldn't see the thing itself, just the way the light shifted around it, like it absorbed the glow from the emergency signs. No door opened, no footsteps entered the room. And then the tray was empty, not moved, not disturbed, just empty. In less than a second, the food was gone. I heard no chewing, no utensils. The room went silent again. The shadow faded. The temperature returned to normal. I stayed frozen in place, heart racing, not even sure if I was still breathing. I waited until the hallway lights flickered back to their normal state before I crawled out and returned to my quarters. I told my supervisor what I'd seen the next day. He didn't react with disbelief or concern. He just nodded and said, "Now, you understand, never forget it. Always leave the meal." That was the end of it. No further explanation. No names, no questions. One night, a new recruit didn't take the rule seriously. He ate the untouched tray, claiming he was too hungry to waste food. He laughed it off. That night, he screamed in his sleep, loud enough that we rushed into his room and found him curled in the corner, eyes wide open, mouth trembling, muttering, "It was hungry. It found me," over and over. We tried calming him down, but he wouldn't respond to anyone for hours. When he finally spoke again, he begged us to make another tray. Said it was still there in his room, watching from the ceiling. We doubled the offering that night. 2 trays placed side by side, one for the thing, and one as an apology. Whatever it was, it accepted the gesture. The room warmed again, and the nightmares stopped. But the recruit was never the same. He transferred out 2 days later, eyes still sunken, hands shaking. The rest of us never joked about the tray again. Now, each night, we prepare it carefully, make sure it's perfect, and place it at the center table with quiet respect. The mess hall stays empty, the lights stay dim, and the door remains unlocked. Whatever comes through doesn't want to be stopped, and it doesn't like to be watched. I learned not to question the rules, not just because they keep us safe, but because the consequences of breaking them are far worse than anything I've ever seen in combat. That untouched tray might be the only thing standing between us and whatever lurks just outside the veil of normalcy. It's not just a superstition, it's a pact, one we must honor, night after night. There was one sector of the base we were strictly forbidden to enter, Sector 9. It didn't appear on any official map, and none of the senior officers ever spoke about it directly. Anytime someone asked, the response was always the same. Sector 9 is off limits. That's all you need to know. The hallways leading to it were marked with faded red tape, and the heavy steel door at the end was always padlocked, reinforced, and watched by motion sensors. At first, I assumed it was just a decommissioned section or maybe a classified storage area, but there were stories. Rumors passed around in hushed tones during overnight shift stories about what had once been inside. Some said it used to be a biological research lab, a place where the military experimented with weaponized organisms. Others whispered that a containment breach had happened there years ago, and something got loose, something not human. No one knew the full truth, but every single guard, even the cocky new ones, stayed far away from that hallway. The fear wasn't just superstition, it was baked into the air. You could feel it the moment you stepped near the corridor, like the walls were breathing, like the silence was listening. My own encounter with Sector 9 began on a stormy night. Lightning had knocked out several of the external cameras, and I was sent to check the backup power conduits near the west wing. While scanning for damage, I noticed one of the red motion sensors near Sector 9 blinking erratically. It wasn't supposed to blink at all. If everything was fine, it would glow a steady green. But it was flashing on, off, off. Curious, and admittedly a little unnerved, I radioed it in. The reply was sharp and immediate. Leave the area. Now, that's an order. I turned to go, but something compelled me to glance back at the door to Sector 9. Just for a moment. And that's when I saw the bolt on the door unlatched. Not fully open, just slightly offset too, I told myself. It was the wind, or maybe just faulty equipment from the storm. But in the middle of my justification, I heard it. A tapping sound. Like long nails clicking against metal, slow and deliberate. Coming from the other side of that door, I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the gap, and eventually rounded the corner without incident. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about that sound, that slight movement in the door. The next morning, Sector 9 was once again sealed tight. The bolt reinforced, and new warning signs placed along the hallway. No one mentioned the sensor, no one talked about the unlocked bolt. But I wasn't the only one who saw it. Another guard, stationed 2 floors up, admitted to hearing the same tapping noise, echoing up through the vents. A week later, one of our team went missing. His name was Ramirez. He had the overnight shift near the restricted corridor. I was on patrol that morning when we realized he hadn't clocked out. His radio was found lying just 20 feet from the Sector 9 hallway. Battery still full, mic cracked, like it had been crushed. No body, no blood, just the radio and the faint smell of something chemical burnt and unnatural. They told us he had probably gone a well, but none of us believed it. Ramirez was solid, loyal. He wouldn't just vanish, especially not leaving his gear behind. We started noticing more subtle changes after that. Cold drafts seeping from closed vents, lights flickering in the same pattern across multiple sectors, small things going missing, tools, personal items, food, but always near Sector 9. One night, I passed by the corridor while doing rounds and felt a sudden wave of nausea. It came out of nowhere, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up with. That's when I heard a sound I'll never forget. Low, rhythmic breathing. Not like a machine, not like any animal I'd heard. It was deeper, slower, hungry, and it was coming from beyond the locked door. We requested extra security, but the request was denied. They didn't want attention. Sector 9 wasn't just restricted, was buried under decades of secrets, and those secrets were leaking out. The locks were checked daily, motion sensors replaced weekly, and still, the tapping returned. Always around midnight, always the same slow rhythm. The final straw came when someone found a trail of deep scratches along the inside of the corridor wall, leading up to the door itself. 4 parallel lines, jagged and uneven, as though something with claws had tried to get out or get in. We sealed off the entire hallway after that, with multiple locks and a permanent security post stationed at the far end. But the feeling didn't go away. The base felt watched. We knew that whatever was in Sector 9 wasn't sleeping. It was waiting, and worst of all, I started to suspect it wasn't locked in at all. Maybe it was never meant to be contained. Maybe the door was a doorway in both directions, and maybe, just maybe, we had already let it out. After weeks of unsettling events around Sector 9, things seemed to calm until we received word of a new protocol. A high-level scientist and 2 military officials arrived unannounced, escorted by a separate security team we had never seen. Before, they wore no name tags, their uniforms unmarked, and they didn't speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary. We were told to reroute all patrols to avoid Sector 9 and to remain at our designated posts, no exceptions. The reasoning was vague. Classified operations, but we all knew this had something to do with whatever was behind that door. On the third night of their arrival, we noticed odd power fluctuations across the entire west sector. Cameras glitched. The backup generators triggered for 3 seconds without cause. During this time, a long, high-pitched noise rang through the base, like metal scraping against metal from inside the walls. Some of us checked the servers. Nothing had malfunctioned. Others tried to access the camera feeds around Sector 9, but all were blacked out. When we asked Command, they told us it was due to signal interference. The pattern was becoming too familiar. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but they weren't telling us. That same night, I was stationed at the northern watchpoint, but my partner radioed that he had seen movement on the internal monitors. Not regular movements, something crawling across the ceiling of Corridor 17, which connected to the restricted sector. At first, I thought he was messing with me, but then the alarm triggered only for 5 seconds, then silenced. The feed to Corridor 17 went black immediately after. We were told it was a system reboot, but the look in the commander's eyes when we asked, that told us the truth. They were scared, genuinely, silently, terrified. Later that week, one of the scientists, Dr. Halpin, approached me. His face looked drained of all color. I'd only seen him from a distance before, but that night, he broke protocol and quietly handed me a folded slip of paper. "Don't be here tomorrow," he whispered. "Whatever happens, don't be on base." He didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked off, disappearing down one of the restricted service tunnels. I opened the paper as soon as I was alone. It had coordinates scribbled on it far off base and a single word underneath: extraction. I didn't know what to make of it. Was this a warning? Was I being told to run? Or was it some kind of test? That night, I barely slept. I kept looking at the door to Sector 9 through the main hallway monitor. Just as before, the red light on the sensor blinked twice, then stayed dark. The next day, all hell broke loose. We were awoken by sirens, not the usual ones, but a deeper, continuous drone that none of us had heard before. Emergency lights bathed the halls in red. My radio crackled with panic, voices yelling over each other. Breach in containment. Lock down all sections. I grabbed my gear and ran toward the command center, but smoke was already beginning to creep through the ventilation. A horrible smell followed burnt rubber mixed with something organic. As I moved through the hallway, I heard it again, that low, hungry breathing I'd heard before, only now much closer, louder, and then a scream. Human, sharp, and cut off mid-sound. Guards were scrambling in every direction. The command center door was bent inwards. Something had punched it from the outside. The lights flickered as I reached the elevator, only to see footage playing on the emergency screens. Corridor 17, something tall, humanoid, wrong, moving across the floor like smoke made solid. Limbs too long, eyes like flickering white orbs. The footage ended before it reached the camera. Static, then nothing. We tried to evacuate, but the exits were sealed. Automated voice warnings played on repeat. Containment failure. Quarantine in effect. Do not attempt to leave. But it didn't matter anymore. We all knew it was too late. Whatever was in Sector 9, it had been let out. Or maybe it it had never really been in. I followed the paper's coordinates. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe I was just following the last clear thought in a collapsing reality. When I reached the marked point in old, decommissioned shack, half buried near the edge of the forest, I found the other two guards who had disappeared days earlier, alive but changed. They didn't speak. They just stared at me like they were seeing through me, like they knew what I'd seen. Behind the shack, there was a transport chopper, unmarked, no lights, engines running. A soldier with a black visor nodded silently and ushered me in. We left in silence, flying over the base as thick black smoke rose from one of the sectors, Sector 9. As the ground grew smaller, I caught one last glimpse through the window, a shape moving along the perimeter fence. It looked up, and though we were hundreds of feet above, I swear it smiled.